with the sins and also the remedy for sin. And actually, you can tell maybe from our parents who were there before that they have set a system dealing with sin. If person has sinned, has transgressed according to the customs and morals of the society, then something has to be done involving a sacrifice, purification, confession, reparation, and finally they do sacrifice that will bring now the relationship back. In African context, we see when people have done wrong and they believe that the sin will bring annulment to them, then they devise a mechanism for the remedial of sin. We see they used to have a religious priest from the local community, and then they set aside an altar, and then they could have an animal to be slaughtered, and then they gather together as a society or a family, and then the ritual was performed to get rid of the sin that has been done. They slaughter a goat, and the internal contents they could be used for purification. You know, in African context, especially for Kikuyu, they could took that internal context and then they sprinkle to them, purifying them, and thereafter they could use the blood for appeasement, and later they could eat together and celebrate all of that. That one, they believed that by doing so, they had a remedy for sin. That is now, in African perspective, in those days before the coming of Christianity. We see that there was importance for religious priests and the team that have headed the society, and also make note of the altar, make note of the animal to be slaughtered, and make note of the deity who was to be appeased by what they did. So, by noting that, in Old Testament, things were almost the same. You know, Hebrew were people who used to offer sacrifices, maybe feast of thanksgiving. They have a feast of maybe fellowshipping together, where they could invite the presence of God and celebrate together as people of God and people united together. And whenever they offered a sacrifice, maybe of giving thanks, maybe of fellowshipping together, they could not go without mentioning the forgiveness of sin. Later, these early sacrifices were later developed into sacrificial system of children of Israel. They developed a time where they could go and offer sin sacrifice, as we have seen in African context, where sin offerings in Old Testament was compulsory whenever people realized they had committed some accidental sin that broke their fellowship with God. In sin offering, atonement was the central issue. The animal or goat without defect, which was fat and good looking, was killed in the usual manner, and the richest and the most vital parts were burnt in the altar as God's portion. The special feature of the sin offering was the treatment of the blood, and the carcasses, the blood from for the sacrifice was sprinkled out in the altar, and some were taken to the holy place, where it was sprinkled in front of the veil and placed on horns of the altar. That was now the perspective in Old Testament. Also, they used to do this, to do sin sacrifice. But as we continue to see, the sacrifice was done oftenly, now and then, and people continued erring before God, and the priests continue on offering sin sacrifices now and then. Sin offering was made whenever people made a sacrifice, but still atonement for the sin was needed. So sacrificing did not mean that people had done what we call atonement. Now a new term